his birth to the present day. Today we are going to talk about Jesus as Lord of history, from the time of Abraham to the time of his birth, when in anticipation of his coming, there were hundreds of prophecies. The story of our salvation is in the Old Testament. There are 46 books in the Old Testament. If you read 15 minutes a day, you could read the whole Old Testament in about 9 months. So we are going through that history, 2,000 years, in just a few moments this morning. We're going to do that by means of looking at the Jesse tree, to give us an illustration of all the characters that were in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Remember, as God, Jesus as God, we know where he came from. But Jesus as man, where did he come from? He came from a nation that was started, begun with Abraham, in order to give a human nature to the Son of God. So we look at the Jesse tree. The red dot on the first branch of the tree. Over on the left is the creation. Now, the universe may be billions of years old. If there are 2 trillion galaxies, then knowing that it is billions of years old makes a lot of sense. Man is on the earth, as we know him, between 50,000 and 300,000 years. There are different opinions on how long man, as we know him, has been on the earth. And we're not concerned here with the development after God created, how he developed the species, whether it was through special creation or through evolution. It could have been either one. There are many, many theories of evolution. If it were by evolution, then Adam and Eve, the middle section here, there was one man and one woman, eventually, who developed, and from them was the whole human race, giving unity to the human race so that we can really call ourselves brothers and sisters through this descendancy from Adam and Eve. We know what happened in the garden. They disobeyed God's law. They lost all the great gifts of intellect and will that God had given to them. But God never abandoned them. He told them right from the beginning that he would send a Savior. And that was embedded in the mind of humanity for several thousand years. We see over on the right, Noah and the ark. So, a number of years between Adam and Eve and Noah, we do not know how many years, we find that the world had fallen into idolatry and into immorality, similar to some of the things that are happening today. And God destroyed the world, or at least part of it, by a flood, so that only Noah and his family survived. So that the whole human race then really came from Noah and his family. Now, we call this first branch prehistory. Obviously, no one was there when God created the heavens and the earth and all things. No one was present as an eyewitness. That's why we call it prehistory. So what we find here is revealed in the book of Genesis. So the first 11 chapters of the first of Genesis describes prehistory. Then we come to the second branch. Now we are into history. Abraham lived about 1,800 years before Christ. He was a man of great faith, one of the few people in the world who believed in one true God. So God chose him, called him out of Chaldea, present Iraq, where all the fighting is going on. He said, I want you to leave this place. I'm going to send you to another land. We call it the Promised Land. It was the country of Palestine. Now, Abraham is the father of the Jewish nation. There were no Jews before Abraham. So this whole nation then was begun in order to give a human nature to the Son of God. Abraham had his son Isaac. Isaac, we see him on the altar of sacrifice. God had said to Abraham, I want you to sacrifice your son to me. He had just told Abraham that his progeny would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore. Now he is telling him to slay his only begotten son. Abraham is obedient, but God does not permit him to take the life of his son. No more human sacrifices. Isaac had a son named Jacob. Now Jacob's name was changed to Israel. That's where we get the name of Israel and the state of Israel and the Israelite people. Jacob, in turn, Israel, had 12 sons. Those 12 sons that became the 12 tribes of Israel. We have 3 of these sons are significant. Judah, from Judah, all the kings would come. King David, King Solomon, 42 kings and 1 queen from the year 1000 to the time of the birth of Christ. We had Levi. From that tribe, all the men of that tribe would be the priests who would offer sacrifice in the desert and also in the temple when it was finally built. The tribe of Levi would be the priests, and the other 11 tribes would support the tribe of Levi. That's how important worship of God is in his sight. Then we have Joseph, probably the most well-known, with his coat of many colors. Joseph was a favorite of his father Israel, and his brothers were jealous and envious of Joseph. And so they sell him into slavery. Well, Joseph is taken to Egypt from Palestine, and there he strikes it rich, gaining the favor of Pharaoh and becoming second in line as head of the kingdom of Egypt. And subsequently, it was Joseph that brought his father and all the sons and tribes down to Egypt, to the land of Goshen, because there was a famine in Israel. And so the Jews then were in Egypt through Joseph. Over on the left, we see this man, this mysterious figure, Melchizedek, a priest, who's offering an unusual sacrifice of bread and wine, a foreshadowing, 2,000 years before Christ, a foreshadowing of the sacrifice of bread and wine we have in the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Going to the third rung, we see Solomon. He is flanked by these 2 women. One of them is the mother of this child, and that's what the dispute is. Now, Solomon was the son of David. David was the second king of Israel. He was anointed during the time of the first king, and then he routed all the enemies of the Jews. He consolidated the kingdom, and so lived in a very peaceful way. And he wanted to build a temple to God. He said, I'm living in a nice house. I want you to live in a nice house. God said, you will not build me a temple. Your son Solomon will build a temple. You have shed too much blood. So Solomon then ends up building the temple in Jerusalem. Solomon was known as for his wisdom, and that's what the scene here is. If you want to read about that, it's in the first book of Kings, in the 3rd chapter, to find out how Solomon decided who was really the mother of this child. As we go to the right, we see the lion, called the Lion of Judah. The kings had this sign of the lion on their coat of arms. Over to the left, on the 3rd branch, we see these men who represent all the prophets of the Old Testament. People like Ezekiel, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Amos, all of those men, and they had a particular function. From the year 800 to 1200 BC, they, in the course of 400 years, these men prophesied with exactitude where the Messiah would be born, when he would be born, the town of Bethlehem where he would be born, that his mother would be a virgin, that he would be crucified, and they are over 100 prophecies, hundreds of years before Christ, given by different men about the Messiah. This is, again, what makes Jesus exceptional. Of all the founders of world religions, he is the only one who is foretold several hundred years before he actually came. And then we reach the top limb of the tree, and we find the 3 wise men from the east, 3 kings, who come. They must have had some knowledge of the prophecies, so they knew from Daniel that the Christ would be born at a certain time. And so they went to Palestine and finally were directed to Bethlehem to find the child Jesus, to find Joseph and Mary. And it's interesting that Mary's genealogy in the Gospel of Luke goes from Mary to King David, to Judah, and to Abraham. In the Gospel of Matthew, the linealogy is traced, Joseph's linealogy, and his genealogy was traced from himself to King David, to Judah, and to Abraham. So that Jesus really was legally the king of the Jews. That's why Herod became so upset when he knew that there was a real king of the Jews who was born. Herod was a puppet of the Romans, so he tried to kill Jesus unsuccessfully. The sheep here are a reminder of the sheep on the hillsides during the birth of Jesus. The lilies are a sign of purity of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And we see that finally from Abraham we come through the history of the Jews to Jesus of Nazareth, born in Bethlehem of Mary and Joseph, the Lord of history and the Lord of our lives.